And a very special thank you to our Patreon subscribers.
Hey fam, Newman here from Movies for Days, your non-pretentious easy access movie chat podcast and weekly deep dive into any film from any genre, from any decade with anybody's guess as to how we chose that movie that week. Proud member of the You Run Podcast Network. Check us out where all great podcasts can be heard. And on Twitter at MoviesDays. Movies is spelled regular, Days is spelled with a Z.
Hello and welcome to the first inaugural pilot episode of Horrific Heroes. With me today, we got Rob from Creepy and Geeky Podcast, friend of the show, friend in real life, friend, all around good guy.
No, around friend.
All around. I took off with nowhere to land,
That's all right. I've done the same thing many times.
But yeah, like I said, so this is the first episode of Horrific Heroes. This was something that had been percolating in my mind for a little while. Mostly what it stems from is I will sit down with Angel, we'd be recording something, and it'd be usually at the end of Coffee Crypt or something, it'd be some recommendation. And I'll recommend something that's just not horror at all, but I'm like, ooh, this has horror elements. This has horror elements. So I was like, how can I sort of piece this together? And sort of landed on horror in sci-fi, fantasy, and superhero genres. Because those genres are so versatile, and so is horror, and there's lots of overlap. Right. And then I got to thinking, who would be a killer co-host? Angel was like, Rob, and I'm like, hell yeah. So I reached out to you, and you were like, sure, why not?
Heck yeah. No, I'm a big fan of, obviously I'm a huge fan of comic books. I like sci-fi and fantasy, and I love horror, obviously. And so, it was definitely, you rang me up, and I was like, yeah, I'm on board.
So this show is really going to run the gamut. So we definitely want to hear from you guys, like what piques your interest, what right off the hop. And this is probably my most recent obsession, if you can't tell from the background. I have been head over heels with X-Men 97. Grew up with the animated show in the 90s. Just loved X-Men in general. Admittedly, had not been as well versed in the comics themselves. What has your history been with the X-Men?
Well, I am a longtime reader of the X-Men comic books. I kind of go up and down with them depending on the era. But my era stems from the 80s mostly. So I grew up in my teens. I got into them a little bit heavier during the era of the Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee time. It was a really fun time. A lot of what X-Men 97 has been doing is kind of in that range a lot, and so it's been kind of fun to see these episodes explore some of those aspects of the stuff that I grew up, especially Inferno. So that was really
fun. And what's so fascinating is just the X-Men universe. And now I'm starting to learn this as X-Men 97 really inspired me to go and dive into the comics. So I started with Giant Size #1, right before Chris Claremont hops on, and now I'm working my way through. I am just about to start the Brood Saga. I'm following this really insane list of chronological X-Men appearances that someone put together. Found it on Reddit. You can find everything on Reddit. It's wild. And now I just have I have this Excel spreadsheet, and I skipped over some of the minor cameos that they make in other shows and other issues and stuff. But just generally been following chronologically.
The X-Men for a long time, especially in that 80s era, they were pretty insular. They would guest star in other books here and there, but it wasn't really until the 90s, late 80s, early 90s when they started to really expand out everybody into all these different guest star spots. I mean, like I said, they popped up now and again, but It
Right.
really wasn't until later because everybody wanted to use Wolverine, of course, because Wolverine's always been the fan favorite, and so but they were like, "No, we're not going to do it," and then it exploded, and they use
Yeah.
Wolverine in everything now.
Yeah, the crossovers really are far few between depending on what it is. Like
Yeah,
Marvel Team Up was a series,
yeah,
so that so they
you get
show up.
them a lot in that one.
Yeah.
You get
And I
X-Men.
just read it was I think the first universe wide crossover. It was planned for the Olympics of the time. It was superhero contest of champions.
Contest of Champions. Yep.
It was like a 3 issue, so I just read
Yep.
that. Uh,
Mm,
you know, not very well. I don't know if it's going to turn out to be very consequential to the universe at all,
not
but
really.
I don't think it does.
No.
It was a fun read, regardless.
When you get to Secret Wars, Marvel's superhero Secret Wars, that one has a few more consequences to the overall uh narrative of the Marvel universe for a few years.
Yeah, that one is coming up pretty soon. In,
Yeah.
in terms
Came
of
out
where,
in about 1985. So
yeah, I'm pretty close to that now, I think. But yeah, so specifically, what got me so excited to bring my love for X-Men into Voices from the Mausoleum was this particular episode that we're about to talk
yeah.
about. It was the third episode of the season, Fire Made Flesh, which is an adaptation, remix, telling of the Inferno arc. So, spoiler alert, we're going to be diving into this full
Yes.
force. It's been out a while, so if you haven't watched the
Go
episode,
watch it.
go watch
Then
it.
come
It's on,
back to us.
yeah, watch it on Disney Plus. It's there. It's like 30 minutes, which is longer than your average animated show, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Not 20 something minutes, plus commercials. So
Yeah, since they don't got to worry about ads, they can actually pad it out, stretch it out a little bit and, tell some more stories. So that's really nice.
no, that's the thing. I know that's a general complaint I noticed before we really dive in is people are saying, well, yeah, these episodes feel like they move so fast, and they really, considering the medium, they are packing in a lot.
Oh yeah.
30 minutes is long for an animated show.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, so right off the bat, what I really enjoyed in the first act of this episode, the last episode ended on a cliffhanger of a second Jean Grey showing up at the door, looking worse for wear. All the X-Men are confused. And then we open up with them sort of figuring out, Beast does his genetic testing, and they figured out that the Jean Grey that's been around and who's pregnant, or was pregnant,
Just gave birth. Yeah.
just gave birth, is not their Jean Grey. It's a
No.
younger Jean Grey. And then the Jean Grey that just showed up is actually their Jean.
Yeah.
So right off the hop, I love the atmosphere in this
Mhm.
first act. Very like from when Madeline, so the Jean clone, is reading Jean's mind and sort of going through where, we're getting images of Sinister's laboratory and this really like very classic gothic vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely. I think it's interesting too because this episode, is really quick. Like, there's so much going on, and not like I don't mean quick in a bad way, but there's so much going on, and they're kind of throwing a lot at you,
Yeah.
all at once. But it's not hard to understand. They do a pretty good job at breaking it down. But yeah, it's coming from the background again, coming from the comic, having read the comic books and everything like that. I mean, obviously, I already knew basically what was going on, and
Yeah.
like you said, this is a remix of the comic books. They're going to change things. They're going to mess around with stuff. The storyline of Madeline Pryor was a lot longer. It was a lot different because in the
Hmm.
comic books, Jean Grey was dead at the time. Jean Grey had died earlier during the Dark Phoenix saga.
Yes, that's
And
really where I'm at in my read through.
yeah,
Jean's not around.
she's not around. Yeah, she's been
So
dead for years. And then
funny
Madeline
enough,
Pryor shows up, and Madeline
yeah.
Pryor looks slightly like her, but not enough. She's not exact clone of her, and so that's what. So it's slightly different, like I said. So
Hmm.
it's fun to see it done in this this version than it was in the comic book. What were you
So you want to laugh? I think they planted the seeds really early with Madeline
gonna
Pryor because so there's a crossover that they do with Spider Woman, and she's in a hospital, and there's a little girl in the hospital named Madeline Pryor.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it either was just a name that they really liked and
Oh,
used
I
twice.
don't think so. The
Right. Okay.
So this is the interesting thing, because even in the X-Men comic books, you'll see, as you've been reading, they'll lay seeds years in advance. Chris Claremont was that kind of writer who would do something like years ago and then pay it off in the future. So
Yeah. So there's this little girl in San Francisco in this hospital. One panel, and she's like, "I'm Madeline Pryor. I'm Maddie Pryor," or something. She says, "Yeah." She doesn't say Madeline. She says, "I think she says Maddie Pryor." I'm like, "Huh? Okay. Well, now I've seen this episode. I'm like, now I know what's coming." And like,
Mhm.
but so cool that it's seated in like a random Spider Woman crossover. So I'm like, okay, shoot, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Anywho, so right off the hop, right? So we're getting these like gothic vibes. Jean's sort of escaping this like mad scientist laboratory, running through the woods. It's so cool, so like classic, almost like Universal movie
Universal,
kind of
yeah.
vibes, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Um,
Well, and this and we're gonna get into it, but this episode is filled with so many horror esque things. I mean, it's that this episode's a great way to start this show with, is because it's literally got so many cool horror things going on in it, and just with this kind of classic in the beginning, kind of easing you into what's going to be coming. So
Yeah, yeah. And I love that this episode too sort of leans on different kinds of horror. Where you have psychological horror, body horror. There's a lot going on. And
mhm.
sort of where the drama takes off here is, Madeline, who still thinks she's Jean at this point, is like, no one believes me. Everyone's like, I know who I am. My memories are my own. She's taking her son, who she just had birth, just gave birth with, running into her room. And it's sort of this real moment of panic, and
Mhm.
sort of, Scott comes in trying to, calm her. And,
Not doing a good job at it, because Scott is not emotionally capable of doing stuff like this.
I think, right. I think this whole, well, I mean, Scott had a whole arc this season. I think he sort
Yeah.
of became more vulnerable and more emotionally intelligent as as the season goes on, specifically around his family, but especially not here. He's not prepared, like you said. It's just not.
Right.
And so very much leaving Madeline very isolated,
Yeah.
and that sort of becomes Sinister's moment to attack, right? And he sort of takes advantage of that isolation that she's feeling. How did you feel about that? No, you're good. I just fixed it.
I know it keeps moving on me.
Honestly, I'm not even noticing. Maybe because I'm just talking so much. I'm like,
Well, I just started seeing a lot more space above my head, so I was like, "This
you're
is so
just
weird."
slowly sinking. Um, how did you feel sort of about this introduction to really seeing Sinister for the first time, and just that whole sequence in Nathan's bedroom?
Oh, I love it. Mr. Sinister is one of my favorite X-Men villains, because he's literally his name. He is the most sinister character. Kind of like, to me, he's always been like the consummate, like, just bad guy villain. Doesn't care that he's the villain. He knows there's no
Yeah,
redeeming Sinister at all. Like, he doesn't want to be redeemed. Most other villains, you can see these shadows of humanity in them. Sinister doesn't have that at all. Nathan Essex, his real name, is not a good person at all.
yeah,
He's lived for, over 100 years, because he has stolen the DNA from other people so that he can live and keep working on that kind of stuff. So it's yeah, no, he's I love Mr. Sinister. So
yeah. And he
um
looks so good here,
yeah.
right?
And I'm not positive, but had he not been in any of the earlier seasons of the X-Men animated series?
Yeah, no, he did. He
Okay,
was. So
okay.
he was in.
I thought he had because they had mentioned something during this episode how they had, he'd experimented on them and stuff before.
Yeah,
So,
so his big thing was with Morph. So Morph talks about
oh, right,
so in the original series Morph dies.
right,
And then we find out in season 2 that Sinister had him and had manipulated him and sort of made him his puppet.
right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I was like, I don't remember, but because I'd watched some of the original series, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, him showing up in this, especially kind of oozing in and out of the shadows, was definitely a lot of fun. Talking over the baby monitor and everything,
I thought that
very, very creepy.
was so well done. I mean, like, so baby monitors in horror movies is a trope. That is a thing.
Yeah,
And, every time I look in my baby monitor to look at this because it's the video one,
yeah,
this is the 90s, so they didn't have those, I don't think. I think it was just the radio.
yeah.
I'm always expecting something to happen.
Kind of shadow on it or something. Yeah,
Yeah, like I was thinking, I remember they used it in
shades of paranormal
Insidious.
activity.
Yeah, Paranormal Activity, Insidious used it. Like it's a common trope. I love that they had that in here, but not in the typical way, right? It's like they're
Right.
already in the baby's room and he's using it to manipulate her. And we get that brief sort of shot in the shadows of him behind her. And he has some real creepy lines in this episode,
Hmm.
right? Like the whole
Yeah.
you can call me father. It's like so it is the horror version of Luke, I am your father.
Right. Yeah. No, he's so good. Like, and they've that's what's fun about this episode in so many ways. It's like it's horror light, which is great because this is exactly what we're talking about. Is this kind of using this medium to introduce horror elements, and
Yeah.
it's so fascinating to watch them do that in that way. And that's just barely we're just scratching the surface of what's coming in this
Oh,
episode.
right. This becomes the start of Madeline's sort of psychological horror, right? From this isolation and sort of when she's our most vulnerable. And there's even other layers here. Because I even wrote down this other choice, and I always look at the deeper meaning here. And I know that
Mhm.
X-Men 97 is, the writers were very social conscious here. And so the line that he says to her here is, your mind and body belong to me, you have no choice,
Mhm.
is very, I think, on the nose here
Oh
of
yeah.
like how a lot of women feel in general.
Right. Well, and
And
especially during current times,
yeah.
especially right now with everything that's going on, it's like, yeah, no, that's very topical, then and now. So
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, this debate has been going on, and women have been experiencing a lot of these issues since women have been around. Let's
yeah,
be honest.
yeah, yeah.
So it is. So I think it hits on a lot of different levels,
Hmm.
right?
Oh yeah.
In terms of the horror, and so then we get this transformation into, tell me your dark desire, I will show them my inferno, or and so the image we have behind us here, right, is just sort of I love the color scheme of like the green and the
Yeah.
purples.
Yeah, no, it's very very vibrant. I think it's interesting too because one could say, she flips this switch like a little too easily, but like it's once he activates that switch in her head with the gem in her, then that's where it comes into play because you see later on that
Yeah,
once that's removed, that she can kind of get rid of that influence because right now she's just completely under Sinister's influence.
right, right. Yeah. So sort of like visually, right? It's through through this like his little red gem, right? Kind of we
Right.
get that as like the metaphor here of what he's switching, and I think because this episode moves so fast, they only had 10 episodes, right? So they could have easily have done, right, like multiple episodes of Madeline's slow
Progression. Yeah.
descent, right?
Yeah.
So I think flipping of the switch idea, it works to kind of get them where they need to go quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one could argue that, that it's a little too quick, but I think because it's a visual way of doing it, that we get that progression without having to spread it out as long as we do. They kind of, in a lot of ways, this is kind of one of those one and done episodes where we get the entirety of this whole Goblin Queen Inferno storyline just in one,
Yeah.
and then we can move on to what's the rest of whatever's going to happen. So, and it's fine. Like it'd be fun to have seen like I would love for them to spread out and make these storylines, you know, as long and deep as they were in the comic books. But I'm realistic. They gotta get going on all this. They got a lot of storylines to talk about. So
I mean, yeah, the original was very similar in the sense that like Dark Phoenix Saga, 5 episodes tops.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
a lot of things were mostly 2 episodes.
Yeah, and then, I mean, you still get, and we're still getting Sinister throughout the rest of this season,
Hmm.
as he's, contending with Bastion and stuff like that, all the rest of the stuff that's going on. So it's definitely not fully done,
Hmm.
but it's for what this, at least just the Goblin Queen and the Inferno storyline itself, real nice and easy, taken care of, and they can move on to the next heartbreak that they got to deal with. So, and there's a lot
Yeah,
of heartbreak in this episode too. So,
absolutely. So let's get into that. So we have that transformation. We get the mommy's busy, which again, fabulous line. And then we get this sort of house of horrors, right? So the X Mansion literally descends into hell.
yeah,
And then I would say most of the X-Men sort of almost have to face their own individual hells.
yeah, their
We
own
get
personal demons.
their own personal demons, right? We get a very Hank McCoy reference to Dante's Inferno, very on point.
Well,
Uh,
the interesting thing about this too is they talk about how she is manipulating reality. So they're not really, I don't think they're really going into hell,
mhm,
or anything. Now, in the comic books, there is a lot of that comes across because a lot of it has to do with the original storyline deals with these two demons from this reality called Limbo,
mhm,
and they come and barrage the Marvel universe with demons and overtaking everything, and some of the heroes even turn into wickeder versions of themselves, and Sinister's involved in all of this as well. It's a big storyline,
mhm.
but it's so within this context, at least within this episode, it's just reality, as they know it, is just being altered to seem like they're in hell, whereas
Right.
they're not really in hell. So I thought found that to be a little bit more fascinating in a way because I did like that there was a slight little nod. Morph transforms into Ileana Rasputin,
Mhm.
also known as Magic, who is one of the catalysts for the Inferno storyline as well. Um, she's one of the major players because she's the ruler of Limbo,
Yeah.
and so so I know that she's not really in the episode. And at first, I turned away, and then all of a sudden she was on the screen. I was like, wait. When did she come into this? And then it was Morph, and I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like,
Right.
"That makes more sense."
You get a lot of cameos through Morph.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, so it is very different, right? Leaning more into the mental power
yeah.
of Jean and Madeline versus the more supernatural hellscape
Right.
elements.
Well, and she really uses her powers to, like we said, dealing with their personal demons. You know, it, each one of them is being shown something that they don't want to see.
Yeah.
And so it's funky, like
Yeah. So I mean,
in the worst ways.
yeah, no, I mean it's fantastic. So I mean, let's go through
Yeah,
some of our heroes and like so with Gambit, of course. So we know in the background we have sort of Rogue and Magneto sort of rekindling this relationship, and so Gambit is very much aware, but it has not confronted Rogue about it yet,
right.
really. Um, so we get this really funny gag of Rogue and Magneto sort of, reserving the danger room for themselves.
Right.
So, you know, right prior to that, right, and then we get Gambit sort of coming, walking in on them, and then we get this really cool body horror
Body
moment
horror, yeah.
of them like morphing skin, and it's really like nasty stuff.
Gross, yeah. No, as a body horror, like, not huge fan, yeah, it was just one of those things, and like, each one of them experiences, like, body horror in different ways in
Mhm.
this whole sequence, which was fun, because it's
Yeah.
just yeah, it's just the I think that's what works about it too, is that using the body horror in this way was a great visual shortcut to show just how horrible all this is, rather than, um any other kind of scare that you could do and bringing in some of those other horror elements. Body horror was just a great visual way to do it.
Yeah, and I think it just lends itself to stories about mutants in general because
Mhm.
a lot of
Yeah.
them do experience sort of a body transformation in general, right? So I think that world is so ripe with like I always think of like I think it's the first X-Men movie with Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and what is it, Rogue, that asks him like, does it hurt when his claws come out? And he's like,
Mhm.
every time.
Every time.
So I think, right, it's just it just pairs with these characters so well because you have stuff like that just exists in the world for them.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I mean, and we see and there's an interesting bit about mutants in the Marvel universe too, is that the X-Men represent a lot of times the kind of mutants that exist that look normal on the outside. For the most
Mhm.
part, you would never tell if these people were mutants or not. But a large majority of mutants in the Marvel universe are people with what we would consider grotesque features
Mhm.
because their mutation was something different and that they are not able to hide. Think about Nightcrawler, being at least a more prettier extreme on that end of it, but,
Yeah.
there's like, you look at, people like Glob in the comic books or Eye-Boy, there's no way that either one of them get away with being, looking normal in the rest of society, so
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think Nightcrawler, for example, is a really good example there. Even in the comics, right, when Nightcrawler first gets recruited, now this is fresh in my head. Professor X gives him literally a device that he can pass
the
for
image
normal.
inducer, yep.
Yeah, the image it is. So I'm like, oh man, that really talks about a lot. I mean, they're really getting
Yeah.
into like code switching and passing and a lot of wild stuff. Look at a character like Mystique, who can
Mhm.
pass, but she can never truly be herself. And
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of layers
Yeah.
you can dive into there.
And
But you're
especially with
right
the
though.
most recent revelation of Mystique in the comic books. So,
Oh, I have to catch up to that part.
yeah, I'll let
But
you get to it.
well, I know, funny enough, right? Didn't Claremont want Mystique to be Nightcrawler's father because she would have morphed into a man with
Maybe.
destiny?
I'm not sure if that was his original intent, but, I if you want me to spoil it,
Well,
I
I right,
can.
I mean, doesn't she, is it Destiny, her name?
Destiny.
Do they
Destiny's
hook
yeah,
up, right?
Destiny is her wife, yeah.
Is there, okay, yeah, yes.
So, yeah, there is a more recent storyline, where there was Mystique had some kind of, something happen. I can't even remember what was going on. It was during the fall, of Krakoa at the very beginning of it. She'd suffered some brain damage, I think, via Professor X, and that sort of unlocks some stuff, and that's when the readers are told about the fact that, as we've known this at least since the '90s, that she was um, Nightcrawler's mother, but we now found out that she is her father, or that he is.
Oh, so that literally is part of the comics.
It is, and
So I
Destiny is his
think,
mother. Yeah,
okay, all right, because I think that I remember reading. Okay, so I didn't realize that was actually part of the
yeah,
story because I think
yeah,
I remember
yeah.
reading that that was actually going to be a
Right.
plan
But
for.
so if that was originally one of Claremont's plans to do, they only just, like, in the last year,
Yeah.
finally put that in place.
Gotcha. Well, because the comics regulations wouldn't let them have
Oh yeah,
same sex
probably.
same
Yeah, the
sex
CCA.
couples or anything trans related or anything of
Yeah,
the sort. So everything had to be coded to just really being metaphors, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, so
Unfortunately,
yeah,
they
I
tried
mean,
what they could. They did try to do what they could
yeah,
as
no,
much as
absolutely.
possible for a long time, and that people can argue that Marvel has been kind of slow when doing stuff like this, compared to other places, but it
You
it
know,
is what it is. I
the
mean,
companies up top may be slow, but the writers always find a way.
oh, they're always trying to, yeah, they're always
The
trying to
writers
find
give
ways
a
to kind
crap,
of
you know.
yeah,
So
good
they
writers,
get things through there. They, they're smart. They know what they're doing.
right?
But let's dive in. So after Gambit, with Rogue and Magneto sort of melding, we also get Sunspot,
Yeah,
and sort of the fear of his rejection of coming out as a mutant to his mother, and they do this really cool, almost like r-
oh,
poltergeist ring kind of TV moment
yeah,
mixed with very Cronenbergy images
thing, yeah,
thing, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
sort of like mouth within a face within a mouth, and some really cool
His mom's head comes out of the creature and like just yeah.
the transformation. But Jubilee coming in, and so the moment where Jubilee uses her powers, you get that really brief, like the most gore I think we've probably seen on the show at this point, right? Was the head gets split in two,
Yeah.
and we get like we get actual gore coming. Out of this thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
Um,
this just goes to speak to again, one, they are making X-Men 97 for a more mature audience. Not like extremely mature. They're not
yeah,
really doing a whole lot, but they definitely know that their audience is the kids who grew up with it in the 90s and now who've grown up and
yeah.
so they're tailoring that while still going, okay, we're gonna hold it back a little bit because we know some people are gonna have their kids watch this with them now. So
I mean, this is a hard TV PG in this in the way that
yeah.
I think
Maybe a
that
PG-13. It's edging up against that PG-13 for sure.
well, this is kind of brings us back to the '80s debate of like Poltergeist,
Right.
Gremlins,
Indiana
Temple of
Jones.
Doom,
Yeah.
right? Like those movies of the '80s that were PG but sort of really fell on
Really
that line.
pushed it. Yeah.
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 And that's I think the line that they're really walking here.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
and so on top of Sunspot, we also have Morph, and I love the shower scene with Wolverine for very particular reasons on my end, but we get but so there's been this coding going on with Morph and Wolverine's relationship as well, like very close friendship, but I think especially when we get to the finale of the season,
I did see
very
that.
much you can feel that Morph has feelings for Logan.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because I haven't watched like every episode of this season, but I definitely felt like they were kind of and it's weird too because Nightcrawler does come into the episodes, but I felt like Morph is kind of taking the place of Nightcrawler in terms of that friendship that
Mhm.
Nightcrawler and Logan had, especially during the Burn and Claremont run.
Oh yeah,
So,
I'm thinking down to like even their outdoor training together is
mhm,
very much
yeah,
part of the comics, and
yeah.
right. So yeah, you're right. Morph does sort of take that.
Takes that place of it
Yeah,
instead of having Nightcrawler be there, which is fine, it's an interesting, dynamic, but yeah, I can
yeah,
definitely see that they're definitely playing with that, how Morph feels, for Logan.
yeah. And I think that's an interesting parallel, just considering Logan's feelings for Jean, right?
Mhm.
This sort of unrequited moment, and then similarly, I mean, I don't know if they're going to do anything different for this series if they're going to have Logan have feelings for more of. I don't know, but I'm assuming probably not. I think they're going to kind of just continue this parallel of unrequited love.
Yeah, yeah, it'll probably just be you know, one of those things that they'll never fully touch on, but maybe something that they'll just keep kinda hinting at, because they I doubt they're gonna wanna go too far with it just to, not, um, put I guess not piss off the wrong people anyway, so which is frustrating because
Yeah.
it's just like, just go for it. Who cares? Like
I don't.
the other people will
Yeah.
support you.
I think they will push. Maybe not particularly with Morph.
Right.
Um, but I have a feeling when Iceman comes back, he'll
Mhm.
probably be out like in the comics. I think they'll go there. It's just I don't know if they'll necessarily push it with Morph and Logan per se.
Right.
But I think they will get around maybe Mystique, and they'll write in Mystique and Destiny, and
Yeah.
we'll see where they go.
Well, and we could also get something where Morph is like I wouldn't want them to do this, but you could always have Morph being Gene or somebody and them sharing a kiss,
Hmm.
and going that way. I wouldn't want that to happen just because it would seem like Morph was tricking Logan into doing something that he may not wanna
Yeah.
do. So that's my only problem with that because then you'd have that, that trope of predatory gay. And like
Hmm.
I definitely don't want that aspect of it. But I mean,
Yeah.
so hopefully they can find a way around it in a way that would make it work. Because I don't have a problem with Logan like, being involved with Morph. Morph to me, as much as Morph presents more masculine most of the time, he is effectively non-binary.
Right.
We say he, but you know, he is an amorphous being.
Yeah.
So the almost the true definition of a non-binary person.
Right. I mean, more of definitely being non-binary. I think right. Even like so, the image is that morph. So the sort of that male appearance from the original series that morph
Right.
sort of shows briefly when when
Yeah.
when they show sort of the sunken
The more
eyes
human
and
version, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. With hair and everything.
almost sort of like they put that in the past.
Yeah, and it felt like it was more of a let's make Morph like or Morph was trying to do that to fit in
Hmm.
more as like, I'm human. Yeah, I'm human.
Yeah.
Um, but like I like that they're just making morph and
Yeah.
just keeping him like he normally is.
So
So
it'd
it's
be
very
very
much like we were talking about with Mystique before too, where Mystique can pass for human or non-mutant looking and everything like that, but she's not being true to herself. And that's the same with Morph. Morph kind
yeah.
of is playing that almost Mystique role in a lot of ways where Mystique or where Morph is he can change into whoever he wants to be and pass
Mhm.
for whoever. But realistically, it's better that he's himself.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
And yeah, so I mean, we get this brief moment in the shower, but I think it very much encapsulates and sort of
sorry, we got
throughout.
off on a tangent.
We don't have a tangent. We get this brief moment in the shower, but then I mean, it comes up again when they talk about
Yeah.
going after Sinister and stopping him, and so Morph talks about sort of the trauma around his experience or their experiences with Sinister. And then yeah, I mean, just very quickly, we don't necessarily have to dive on too much. I mean, so we get this really cool teddy bear transformation into Professor X, sort of taunting Cyclops about like not being
Yeah.
the man he should be, siring the wrong child, a child with the wrong woman, and demerits to you, child, and all this stuff. Like it's very fun. But really, again, this fear of like, am I a good leader? Am I a good husband, father? All of these labels that he's trying to wear, right?
Mhm.
All these hats that he's trying to put on.
Well, and then also disappointing his father figure because, I mean, Scott doesn't have the father around
Right, the
him.
Corsair's not around.
Corsair's not
Exactly.
around. And so, and Corsair was not around during the formative years. Professor X was, and
Yeah.
so, and you're letting down that father figure. It's just like Madeline's really good at preying into all of their minds, into those insecurities, into each one of their biggest insecurities at that moment, anyway. And
Yeah.
just showing like Scott's biggest insecurity is like, I didn't have a solid father figure. How am I going to be a good father to Nathan?
Hmm.
And
The whole arc, I think, with Psyche and Nathan, and it, like, especially being a relatively new parent, I'm like,
yeah,
oh, it hits so different now.
oh yeah, yeah. No, my kids are grown. My kids are both adults now and everything. And then, but that's definitely something that kind of doesn't go away. You're always hoping. You're like, am I a good dad? Like, did I do a good job? And like,
Yeah.
I've even asked my kids, within the last few years, I'm like, did I do a good job with you guys? Like, are you guys, good? Do you think I'm a good dad? And they're like, yeah, I think you're great. And so I'm like, all right, good.
Oh, it's good
So
to hear.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's very good to hear, especially, because it's like, because I have issues with my own parents, you know,
Yeah.
so it's great to see or to hear that from my own kids that I didn't like do anything that really messed them up or, so, but we all have those insecurities for the longest time, anybody who doesn't, I kind of question like, you think you're a good dad the whole time? Like, I hope
Yeah.
so. I hope you're doing a good job. So
Oh, but it
I
is,
want
it's
to
good
ask your
to
kids the
hear.
question.
Yeah. My son's too young to answer
Yeah.
that.
Well,
I
and
think,
probably will be for a while too,
yeah.
so,
He'll be like, "Am I doing a good job?" And he'll be like, "Eat." Okay.
yeah,
Well, as long as I feed you, I guess I'm doing a good job.
yeah, right?
Um, but yeah, and then so sort of from here, chaos sort of just erupts, right? So, they appear to being, to be sucked into hell. This whole big inferno battle plays out. What did you love about, or not love about, sort of this action moment of the episode?
Um, I again, I'm disappointed that they couldn't go fully more into the actual, going into hell type situation or bringing hell on earth, like they do in the comic book. That would have required more room than they had for this episode. But barring that, it was fun to see them fight the demons. The biggest best part I think is when Cyclops is powering up Bishop. It was such
Yeah.
a fun moment, and that's really kind of the centerpiece of that whole sequence is just when they do that, and just before Jean comes in to kind of save them.
It's time for an exorcism, punks. Is one of my favorite lines.
Right?
Bishop is. They do Bishop justice. I mean, he's not in a lot of episodes this season in general, but more so at the beginning and a little bit at the end. But um, and Cyclops too, right? Like, there's a lot of really cool moments like that. I'm even thinking the first episode with Gambit and Wolverine, where he powers up his claws. There's a lot of good teamwork.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to see that, because I mean, it happens now and again. You see it in comic books, but it's great when you can watch characters definitely play off of each other and kind of use their powers in tandem, to really, kind of level up. It's kind of a video game esque type of thing. You see it sometimes
Oh
in
yeah,
video games where you'll see people combine their powers, like, um, what is it? Iron Man will blast Captain America's shield to like have a redirected repulsor blast or something like that. So
yeah.
it's fun for that kind of stuff. And but yeah, no, I love that when you get these people who will, because I mean it makes sense. Power up Bishop, who's got more power
Yeah,
from absorbing Cyclopses. So it makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of fun.
yeah. And then just the image of him blasting out like the demons and sort of like this like
Yeah,
V formation. It was just, yeah,
it's so
beautiful.
satisfying. Yeah.
And then we get this big devil sentinel that shows up.
Yes.
A lot of foreshadowing as well. I'm thinking
Mhm.
as we get into like the Genosha episode afterwards. And so there's, yeah, there's just a lot of foreshadowing that they do really well in this series. But yeah, like this like devil horned sentinel is just such a cool image.
Really cool.
And then yeah, and so Jean comes in, so we get this image of sort of, she's all in white. She cancels it out. And then Madeline announces herself the Goblin Queen, takes Nathan and heads off. And so they all sort of plan to, they split up a little bit, right? I think like Wolverine stays behind. I think Bishop stays behind. Someone else, I think a couple other people stay behind. Jubilee, I don't think goes with them. Um, and then they head off to Sinister's castle. So we really get this really cool Castlevania-esque moment. I mean, I'm trying to remember the castle from the original series. I guess there was. I'm like really blanking on how look, but it's just so effective here. And Sinister's theme, that's another thing I just will praise nonstop, is the music
Mm,
in this series is so on point.
yeah. Yeah. I honestly didn't notice the theme, but that's sometimes the best thing when music is just good enough that it's not obtrusive, and doesn't take you out of the
Yeah,
moment. So
Yeah, go back. So the X-Men 97
I'll
album
definitely
came
check.
out. They have all the themes and everything listed. My favorite is Storm's theme from this season. It's beautiful piece of music. I mean, but it's sort of horror effectiveness. It's very Dracula, very like Phantom of the Opera.
Right.
It's got some cliches in there, but I think it works. It's fun.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's keeping um in the spirit of Sinister.
Yeah. But we go in for this like final showdown with Madeline, and her on her throne. She's
Mm.
just like gorgeous, fabulous, like just all the gothic sexy vibes, right?
Yeah. And I like what they did with her costume, because there's no way they could have gotten away with doing her costume the way they do it in the comic book. In the comic book, it's a lot more salacious. There's a lot more under boob.
Yeah.
So they do a lot. They had to change it up, and this one's actually more reminiscent. I noticed to Jean's Black Queen outfit from
Yes.
the comics. So I thought that was a nice little touch of kind of pulling that in. And
Yeah. No,
making it into
I think that
variation
that's
of
a
it.
good thing to point out too, right? That's was sort of this, we've had Evil Gene, now we have Evil Gene clone.
Mhm.
Just have those costume uh,
Echoes.
yeah, having the costume tell the story in a way is always an effective thing.
Yeah, just like the echo of, she's evil Jean, but not quite, and so it's yeah, it's just it's fun that they went with that in that direction of it, rather than going obviously for the direction that they wouldn't have been able to go, because again, this is somewhat of a kid show. So
Fair. Yes, yes. They push the envelope where they can. Although I would say,
yeah.
Storm's black outfit
Oh,
is
I
pretty
love her classic outfit. The
is pretty
classic outfit.
revealing. I'll say. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, there's no underboob,
Yeah, yeah.
but there's skin. There's
Yeah.
skin.
No, I've always loved Storm's classic costume. That's always been like the best.
Yeah.
It just I don't know. It just works really well. So
But yeah, I just sort of so my one I would say this is probably my favorite line from the episode. I think it was more for someone says like, be careful, she's under his control, and she's like, you better listen. I know not what I do, and it's it's so playful,
yeah, yeah,
eerie,
yeah,
almost in like how we often match like childish things in horror movies, very poltergeistish. Like that's a lot of the vibe. I was like the teddy bear transformation of Professor X. Like there's a lot of like innocent things that are then turned into horror, and like
right.
just playful lines like that. I feel like just sort of up the ante on that kind of dynamic.
Well, and it also plays into her being a mom too.
Yeah,
A lot of that is much of her taking these innocent things from a childhood and then twisting them into this demonic aspect of
yeah,
that, and just and using that as a weapon against them, because of course you're not expecting something like a teddy bear or any of this other stuff, and they are trying to in effect save her soul in a lot of ways, um
yeah.
and trying to save her from Sinister. So it's just, yeah, there's a lot going on, like you said, with Poltergeist, but also some, just maybe some Exorcist vibes in there as well. Um,
Hmm.
so it's not strong, but it's enough there. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. I always just get vibes of like Carrie too, just someone sort of being pushed
mhm,
to a tipping point, in this case, specifically manipulated by Sinister. Carrie obviously pushed by, you know, bullying and other things,
yeah,
but sort of this idea of like, you see someone, you sort of want to pull them back to their humanity.
yeah,
Um, but they're sort of kind of so far gone at that point. Dark Willow, I think of in
yeah,
Buffy, is a very similar situation here. Um, but yeah, and then we get this battle between well, the first piece is like Magneto, right? And I love the use of um
the
his
stained glass window.
magnetism and her telekinesis, but then like the stained glass is
Yeah,
used so well.
yeah, 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 and he's pulling out the metal frames from those, and and she's just using, what's interesting too is because Magneto is an Omega level mutant, and Jean, and probably Madeline in effect, then
Mhm.
being her clone, is also an Omega level mutant in those ways. You're going hardcore power against hardcore power. So it's
Yeah.
just and Magneto's magnetism can only go so far, where telekinesis can go a lot farther. So,
That's absolutely, we use very
but yeah, no,
specific, material versus any material.
yeah, exactly. Um, and so it was a fascinating sequence because of that, and just watching him break all the glass to try to use it against her,
Mhm.
ineffectively though.
Yeah. And then she sort of, yeah, she puts him down, right? She's like, "I wanna use you as a pet," and then she transforms, or she controls Morph, who transforms into Magic, who then goes into her devil form, which is really cool.
Yes, I love that because it's like it's so quick, but she turns into the Dark Child real quick, and I was
Yeah.
like, yes. So for nerds, like for the comic book nerds, it was just great.
It's a good moment for sure, and, like, people, yeah, people who sort of don't know, or, it's like, it's a cool moment even if you don't know 100% what that's about. I would love I do want some New Mutant animation.
Mhm.
I think this was popular enough where I think they could definitely branch off. Like, you could do an X-Force, you could do a New Mutants and kinda
I would like to
build
see them
out.
bring it. Yeah, I would like to see them bring in the New Mutants. I'd love to see Ileana and Cannonball and Wolfsbane. It, you
They already have Sunspot. I mean, you
yeah,
can sort of shift him over to that series and
yeah, exactly. I mean, you could even include them in this series and just, pepper them in and out, as much as much as possible. I mean,
true.
or do some kind of mix where you would maybe not bring in all of the new mutants if you didn't want to. I don't see why you wouldn't, but you could bring in some of the Gen X kids as well, since
Mhm.
Jubilee was one of those. And so, maybe they're gonna aim that way. I don't maybe there will be a spinoff. I don't know. I think it'd be kind of fun if they did.
Fingers crossed. Alright,
Yeah, right?
yeah. I dig it. Um, and so, yeah, and then we get this moment, right? So Cyclops sort of stops her, with his beams, and she's bleeding, and we get this really cool sort of like blood on the lip moment.
Yeah,
Um, and we get this like bloody kiss. So cool.
yeah,
Again, kind of pushing the envelope here,
yeah.
showing a little bit more blood, some more some more intimate moments.
Right. Yeah, it's funny too because I just watched it today. There was the Honest trailer for X-Men '97. I don't know if you've ever watched any of the Honest
I've watched
trailers.
honest trailers, but I haven't seen the one
Yeah,
for
yeah.
97 yet.
Yeah, it just got released today, so, definitely check that out, but they do mention in that this one's more, mature and grown up. You get a little bit more of, relationship drama in
Yeah,
this, more so than you got in the original series, so
I love
not
it.
that you didn't get any in the original series, but, yeah, it just seems like there's a lot more of it going on.
Yeah, I mean, you did. It was definitely kind of glossy and sort of, it was there. You could pay attention, but it was sort of quick and you move
Sanitized for the
past it.
children, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and then we didn't really mention Sinister sort of dunking Nathan in this like vat,
Mm,
and
yes.
infusing him with this techno organic
Techno-organic
virus.
virus, yeah.
Which it's cool to see the origin sort of play out finally.
Mhm.
We didn't
Yeah,
get that, yeah, obviously, yeah, in the original series.
right. Yeah, because as we should all know by now that Nathan becomes Cable,
Mhm.
and because Cable's already appeared in the series as well, right?
Yeah,
Earlier,
Cable
yeah.
came in, I think, season 2.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense. So that's what's interesting is that up until now they've never known that Cable was their kid. So yeah, definitely has some payoff later on in the season for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And then Jean, very similar to how she sort of helped everyone in the mansion, kind of busts in, and we get this really cool cerebral psychic battle between the
Psychic
two of
battle,
them.
yeah.
What'd you think of that whole
Oh,
sequence?
I always love a good psychic battle. I mean, even in the comic books, it's always great when you can do something on the psychic plane and really get into some of the kind of the metaphysics of the mind. So it's a lot of fun. It was good. I enjoyed it a lot, especially because you've got these two women who are basically the same person, and they both share all of the same memories at this point, and it's it comes down to really who is who, who's real, who's not, and what does that mean for um clone gene going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just the thing that brings Madeline back, right, is just the memory of Nathan's birth.
Yeah,
Right, so there's this memory of like becoming a parent, and which is
the love of a
the whole thing
child.
trips me out of like whose memories are whose. And the idea that you can like remember being pregnant, giving birth, but it wasn't actually you is just
Yeah,
so like, what a
yeah,
mind f.
you're right.
I mean, the whole thing is a mind f, but sheesh, like, but
Well,
that brings her
especially for Madeline, because she is like she thought she was Jean that whole time. Like,
in. Yeah,
she had no, like, it'd be different if you were pretending to be that person that whole time, but she thought she was, and for all intents and purposes, she was.
yeah.
So it's just like, and I love that they don't tell you how long she's been Jean
No,
either.
it's
That
very vague. We don't know when the
yeah,
switch happened here.
yeah. So it'll be interesting if they ever do explain it and how far back it
Yeah.
goes. So,
I mean, there is a point where she is presumed dead after the Dark Phoenix saga. So I think the assumption is that that was probably the time.
right. When she
Um,
came back, that's when Madeline
was there,
took
right?
over.
And that sort of recontextualizes
Yeah.
so much of the
So
original run of
much.
the
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
which is so cool. But they bring her back, and then Gene and Madeline and Scott go in, bust Nathan out of the vat, this big
Yeah.
tube. They don't fight Sinister yet. We get a cool fight scene with Sinister later on in the season. Um, but we sort of get this last sort of horror moment that I love. Where he uses the ladybird. It's a nursery
Mhm.
rhyme.
Yeah.
So he uses ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. Your house is on fire. Your child all gone. And it's like, so, man, it's so heartbreaking because when you realize like they have to say goodbye to Nathan afterwards, like
Yeah.
he still sort of delivered the ultimate horror, right? It's like this family losing a child.
Yeah. They like it ultimately in the end, he succeeded in doing what he in a way, in doing what he wanted to do, and that was to, tear a hole in their heart,
Yeah,
and he wanted to be able to use Nathan for his purposes, but if he can't do that, then he's gonna do the next best thing and make it so they can't even have him.
yeah.
So, and,
Talk
yeah,
about
no,
a villain
that's
with no redeeming qualities.
yeah, I'm telling you, that's what makes Sinister the best. Like, I don't get me wrong, I love a good sympathetic villain, somebody who can maybe be swayed back to the side of the angels, but I love a good unrepentant villain. They're just
Yeah.
so
No,
good.
I mean, we have our Magneto.
Yeah,
Even Bastion sort of had this like redeeming moment of based on his pain. And yeah, Sinister. You don't. That's just the one you're just allowed to love to hate him. That's it. Um,
exactly.
and then of course, yeah, we have this like really big goodbye. Nate Scott doesn't want to have to repeat his father's mistakes. Ironically, then he's not there for his son when they have to say goodbye. But I think it's just not wanting to face that, which he sort of faces that decision again later in the season.
Right.
But yeah, this got me all in the feels, like just Madeline's goodbye to Nathan when she's
Yeah.
doing the psychic message to him.
Yeah. I hope that's something that, and I'm not positive because again, I didn't, um, I kinda skimmed through the whole season, but I hope that's something that comes into play later. Maybe it was like a message that, like, she laid in his mind that he'd be able to, um, listen to, just kind of that, I don't know, something like, whenever you think back on something somebody said, it'd just be
Yeah.
something that she laid in there that would stay in there and
They
keep
don't
going.
I mean, I don't want to spoil it too, but they don't like necessarily replay it, but it does come into play in the sense of like it becomes real clear how that influences Cable's arc
Okay,
for the rest of the season for sure.
good,
And
good.
it becomes this big thing for him and Madeline, and because she survives this episode,
Yeah,
which I know isn't necessarily the case in the comics. um
right.
and so there is more to come in terms of that story. There's a lot more to come, actually.
Well, and this is where she chooses her name too. She chooses a name for herself at the end of this because Jean calls her Jean,
Yeah,
and she's like, no, my name is Madeline Pryor now.
yeah. And so then there's power in the fact that she got to choose her name right
Yeah,
here, and it's about her beginning to form her own identity. So through all this horror, right, it ended in this beautiful moment. Overall, and I we're coming at an hour here, so I want to make sure we sort of Angel and I like a tight hour, so it's like 30
yeah.
hour, I think, So let's overall thoughts on the episode, and sort of, does this sort of scratch the horror itch with your superheroes?
I think in a lot of ways it does. I was actually surprised how much horror was in it. As I was watching it, I was like, wow, they've like really packed in some good quality horror stuff into this, what is this ostensibly a kid show.
Yeah.
So, it's you know, it's it's fascinating how much they were able to fit in.
Yeah, 100% agree. I was so excited to talk about this episode. um, yeah, and there's definitely a lot coming down the pipe in terms of the season, right? I
Yeah,
mean, there's not like necessarily entire capsule episodes dedicated to horror,
right.
but there's
Just more
horror
horror elements.
elements. Yeah, it's particularly around the hybrid sentinels,
Yeah.
and Bastion's whole story, and especially the way that they move. And um yeah, there's a lot, again, more body horror,
Yeah.
some beautiful gothic shots that happen later on, particularly in the finale. Someone, I want, no spoilers for these other episodes, but someone's in a hospital bed, and sort of these hybrid sentinels are kind of lurking in the shadows, and it's just a
Mhm.
beautiful hospital window shot. It's like very creepy.
Yes.
um yeah, and just again, the movements are almost very like, um remind me of like possession movies, the way
Yeah.
someone possessed would move.
Yeah.
Just
Well, and
eerie.
it speaks to on a number of levels too, because not only is it like a possession thing, but it's also like, again, this is where the X-Men and just in general, good quality storytelling will talk about current um, you know, feelings in the kind of in the zeitgeist and stuff like that, that just talking about bodily autonomy and stuff.
Mm,
And so that's what's really great about that kind of stuff too, is that you can think about it on these multiple levels that aren't just a kid show. So,
yeah, yeah.
and that's what you got to
um
love about it.
and I'm looking forward to more. I mean, I hope this is a tradition with X-Men 97, that we get some horror in every
Yeah,
season. I would be all for it. I mean, there's a lot of horror
get the
story
Brood
elements.
saga in there, or did they already do that?
I, I don't think they did the Brood in
Okay.
the original run, now that I'm
Well, that'd be
thinking.
cool if they did it now, because
Now
definitely
it'd be
that would
real.
definitely be some horror. That's alien, like alien-esque um
Hmm.
stuff, body horror right there too. With
Yeah.
infestation.
I would, oh, or if we finally get Magic proper, Belasco, and
Yes,
like, there's a
yeah,
lot that they can really do.
yeah, for sure.
But for us here at Horrific Heroes, right? So we're going to be covering a lot. We Rob and I, when we first met before we planned the show, we just threw out a bunch of ideas. So we're going to be covering, your Spawn, yeah, your Ghost Rider, your, I just got introduced to Son of Satan, and I really want to cover that character, and the Sandman, and
Yeah.
you name it. We're gonna
We can
try
talk
to,
about like 80s movies like Labyrinth and Dark
exactly, and
Crystal, stuff like that.
not
Return
just
to Oz.
superheroes.
Yeah,
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 you know,
yeah.
we're
We
gonna,
no, because we want to really get into the fantasy and sci-fi stuff as well.
yeah. So like, let us know what you're excited about. Like, what
Yeah,
would you want us to cover?
tell us what you want us to cover.
Yeah, definitely let us know in the comments. At Poltergeist Steve on Twitter and Threads, and you know, um, I mean, you could add Voices from the Mausoleum. That's Angel. She'll have to forward it to me.
Right.
um, of course, you have to follow Rob. So you're at
Yeah.
Geek Thulu, right?
At Geek Thulu. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's GeekThulhu. You can find all my links at geekthulu.com.
And right, Creepy and Geeky podcast, all that stuff.
Geeky, yeah.
Check them out.
Make sure to follow my podcast as well because I
Yes.
talk about horror stuff and comic book stuff. So
Yep, all the
if you
time.
like, yeah, all the time, yeah.
All the time. You know, for us on Voices, it's going to be specifically this show. For, you know, comics and horror, nonstop, Rob's your guy there.
Come over to my stuff.
Yeah. So, you know, we don't know quite yet what we're going to be doing for our second episode. Otherwise, once we know ahead of time, we'll start to tease what's coming to the line. But as we start to shore it up, we'll let you know. But
it'll be a lot of fun stuff, though, for sure.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for checking us out, and we will see you next time.
Bye.